The key to drawing a house, or anything for that matter, quickly, is to learn to observe the things we need to observe fast in the right order so that we can draw accurately. So with this house, there's the overall shape, the overall proportions we need to keep right, and we also want to capture something of the feel of this old rundown cottage. A very typical early Australian building, and a great one for a quick 15-minute grab. Now, you're watching me draw this in real time. However, where there's a foliage with the trees on each side, I do speed that up to double time simply to stop this from being too long. But if you want, and you want to watch me draw the trees in real time, you can use the cog icon to slow the video down to half speed for those sections. But I really want to concentrate on the house. Now, you'll notice I started with the right-hand corner and moving across. Now, I had a nice straight edge for the top of the veranda. At the base of the veranda, though, there is no straight line, so I did a rough dotted line simply to reserve the space and to give me a sense of approximately how far down to come, but also then to keep my options open to create a nice feel of foreground, as well as to be able to capture the irregular shapes, but without having to spend too long plotting things exactly. So these are the ways we speed up our drawing when we have, say, 15 minutes to sit by the side of the road while we have a coffee and perhaps capture a charming building across the road. In real time, this whole drawing took me just under 16 minutes. So you can see what I've done. I started with that end post, and then I drew the shape between the post and the side of the building, in effect. That's called drawing by negative space, drawing by the spaces between things. And then I used that first cream brick section as the next space, and I'm working at keeping the proportions correct. And then I used the width of the first doorway, double doorway and window, before the next veranda post. And then I used the next space of cream brick, and then the doorway width, because the next veranda post also happened to line up right on the edge of that. And then I did the same going across. So by learning to see what spaces can I use to plot out the whole veranda, I can keep things in proportion. If I just try to do a long rectangle shape for this section at first, and obviously I'm drawing directly in ink, freehand in ink, so I can't erase anything. If I didn't get the proportions correct, then the proportions of the house would have been incorrect. I would have had doorways and windows that were either too wide for their height, or I would have had too large a space between them, and so forth. And these are all the things that impact how something looks. So we want to keep the proportions correct, and I find this a nice way of doing it. I'm approximately trying to draw this same size, but in the end, I'm letting my drawing determine the size. Keeping my drawing in proportion is what I'm doing as I go. And I finish up drawing this slightly larger than the actual reference I'm using. Now, in doing quick drawings, we have to be very careful what detail we choose to add. And in this case, I'm particularly adding shadows of the depth lines of where the house goes back from that plane of the front wall, so back into the windows. And then for some of the windows, we can see back into the depth of the timber beading. And so it's basically a quick, heavy line to indicate the shadow on that depth. It's the same when I did these veranda posts. I basically did 2 lines, and then I came in with a dark shadow to represent the wraparound section that we were seeing, the depth line. I find doing it that way, I don't let the posts become too wide. Drawing something so fine with a pen thickness that is a significant part of the width, I find that if I try to draw the front section and then added a 3rd line to the right of that, it invariably becomes too wide. So I find that by doing 2 lines and then coming back with the shadowed bit towards the left in this case is a great way to not let the width blow out, so to speak. And so now I'm trying to capture the feel of these windows. or rather the glass behind the windows, the curtains behind the windows, the room behind the windows. Now this is a quick sketch, so I don't want to get too bogged down with it. And in the end, a certain amount of imprecision that is consistent across the whole drawing works really well with a quick sketch, as long as our overall proportions are correct. And as long as, to the degree that there's any perspective, we keep it accurate. So speaking of perspective, the way perspective works, these long horizontal lines, because we're not looking exactly at the building, these long horizontal lines angle slightly more. The lines rise up slightly as they go upwards towards the right. So I need to capture that. I don't want to do it too much, but I want to do it accurately. Now you'll notice, and I drew some lines on my reference to make a point, to work out where the top of the veranda went. I actually drew a straight line, a vertical line, and that helped me to think, okay, what's that height? Because that's where now the line of the actual roof of the building rather than the veranda roof is. I find this is the easiest way to be accurate. And again, you can see the line I drew from that top left corner of the roof, the picture of the roof, and I worked out what it aligned with in my drawing below. And it was just a fraction to the left of the door. And so that helps me position that line. And I did check the angle with my pen. And if I was drawing this on location, my process would be exactly the same as what you see me doing now, except that I would have held the pen up in front of me and turned it so the angle was the same as the house roof, and then I would have brought it straight down onto my paper. It's a lot more accurate than it sounds. Now we have this chimney. What I know from experience is that the thing with chimneys, it's so easy to draw them larger than they really are. I want to convey just this very slight detail on the chimney where we've got this brickwork that comes out slightly and just gives a decorative band. I want to convey that, but I don't want to make it too detailed, too messy with lines. So I'm largely drawing it by the shadow that these protruding rows create. My chimney is still slightly too wide, so I just note that for next time. And now I'm coming to drawing this tree on the right. So we just double time here. I do a very loose rendition of this tree. I really just want to indicate that it's a tree. I put a little more line work into the tree behind because that pushes this building forwards. The one on the left, I don't know that I even add much more to it than that. Now I have this fence. This is where you want to be really careful to make sure you draw the fence between the post and the corner of the building and not between the corner of the building and that double-doored windowed French doors, I guess they're called. And when I first began to draw these palings on the fence, I made them too wide. Fortunately, I noticed that and I was able to correct that. And by drawing a line between them, I got the scale more correct. Getting the scale correct with things like widths of paling fences is really important for creating a cohesive sense of scale over this whole building. So now we're in double time again as I'm doing these large old pine trees that sit behind. Now I'm really doing this in a very rough and ready way. I really want to just capture the values. And even though we have parts of the leaves that are in sunlight and parts that are in shadow and shade, I want to have hatching basically over all of them because the overall value, the darkness, is so much darker than the house and particularly the roof. And it has a lovely effect of almost framing the house. It certainly pushes the house forward a little bit. So when time is short, working out a really gestural way to do, if you like, peripheral details, support acts as I think of them, such as these trees, is very helpful. And I also darken the house that's next door as well, because that also highlights the corner. Whoops, we've just come back into real time there for a moment. And so now my time is getting away from me. And I want to give some indication of the corrugated iron roof corrugated iron roofs are so much a part of early Australian architecture, and the way they weather is really important visually. And particularly what we get is where the sheets join, either whether they overlap each other or whether at their top section they abut some flashing, we see the shadows between the corrugations. And it does create this dot-like effect of darkness. So again, I'm not drawing the detail exactly. I'm trying to draw the effect of the detail, these shadowed dots. And I also need to be careful with these lines to indicate the corrugations, that I get the perspective correct and recognize the fact that these lines will not be parallel across the width of the house, that in fact the angle increases as it moves away from being directly in front of me. And I did a terrible job there, as you can see, lining up the dots on the line that I established, the very light line that I established as being the join line. Fortunately, corrugated shifting often does lift, which does create that effect. So in effect, I've just made this roof look a little more run down, a little more derelict than it really is. But I still think the benefit was there in spending time to capture this feeling of corrugations. It is a big part of the feel of the house, particularly because I'm not going to worry about the brickwork. I'm not going to try and do a hint even of the brickwork, because I feel that visually it's not what we see with the bricks being painted. The cement comes clearly right flush with the brickwork, and so we don't have shadows to make it clear. Now you can see the benefit of my not doing a solid line across the bottom, of doing a series of dots. Now that I've got the whole building basically in place, I can very quickly now suggest the garden, the rather uneven, ill-kept garden. And again, that's part of the charm. So I want to get that rough and ready mounds of dirt, unpruned, uncut grass and gardens. That's very much a part of capturing the feel of this house. And I have all those options still available for me. So again, very loose line work. You are watching this part at real time. Very loose line work is important. And there was this post angled up against the veranda, which I thought just looked great and gave a shadow, which I thought added a nice three-dimensional look. So we're back into a little bit of double time now while I do this trellis work. Now, I really just want to be suggesting what's here. Again, this is the sort of detail where we really don't want to get bogged down being exact, because then if we're not quite exact, it's going to look like we didn't do a very good job. So I want to keep it very loose and suggestive so that it's clear that's all I was trying to do. And you can decide if I did that enough. And now we're still in double time. I'm just doing some hatching along the top of the veranda, or the top under the veranda of the wall, to indicate the shadow. And again, this gives a nice little sense of 3 dimensions there. So a little more hatching, and now just defining that darker edge, which I think helps. So what do you think? A 15-minute drawing while we have a cup of coffee, looking at a lovely old building across the road. This is the sort of technique, when we draw freehand in ink, it's great to develop. It opens so many opportunities for travel drawing. It's a great way of doing things if we're on location. G'day, I'm Stephen Travers. Hope you found this interesting, hope you found it helpful. It was great to do a new drawing after a long time of not, and this was a great one to try, a nice quick gestural one. So why not give it a go? You'll find the photo on my channel community page. But look, whatever you draw, however you draw it, however gesturally or exactly, make sure you have fun. I'll see you next time. Bye.